I thought our marriage was unbreakable. A fortress. I was wrong. A fortress can fall from a single hairline crack, one you don't even see until the whole damn structure groans and gives way. My crack? It wasn't a loud argument or a slammed door. It was a silence. A new, thoughtful silence that had settled over my wife, Sarah, in the weeks leading up to the end of what I thought was us. She'd stare out the kitchen window, a ghost of a smile on her lips, a million miles away from our kitchen, from our life, from me. I'd ask, "Penny, for your thoughts?" And she'd jump, startled, as if I'd pulled her back from someplace she desperately wanted to be. "Nothing, honey," she'd say, her voice a little too light, a little too airy. Just nothing. That nothing was the beginning of everything. That nothing was the first whisper of the storm that was going to rip my world apart. If you've ever felt that shift, that subtle change in the atmosphere of your relationship, you know the dread I'm talking about. It's a cold knot in the stomach that tightens with every evasive answer, every unexplained late night at the office. If you know that feeling, if this is hitting a nerve, then you need to hear this story. Stick with me until the end. The twist, you won't see it coming, started with the scent. Sarah had always worn a perfume called Moonlight Petals, a soft, floral scent that was as familiar to me as my own skin. It was the scent of our first date, our wedding night of coming home. Then, one Tuesday evening, as she kissed my cheek after work, I caught a different note. Something sharper, more exotic. Sandalwood and amber with a hint of spice. A man's cologne, clinging to her hair, her clothes. New perfume, I asked, trying to keep my voice casual, leaning against the kitchen counter as she unpacked her laptop bag. She didn't meet my eyes. Oh no. Must be from the elevator at work. It was packed today. The elevator. A simple, logical explanation. I wanted to believe it. I needed to believe it. But the knot in my stomach tightened. Later that night, in bed, I lay awake listening to the rhythm of her breathing, trying to match it to my own like I used to. It was off. Just a fraction of a beat too fast. She was awake too, pretending to be asleep. I knew her tells. The slight tension in her shoulders, the way she held her mouth. I reached out, my hand finding the familiar curve of her hip under the duvet. "Sarah," I whispered into the darkness. A pause. A beat too long. "I'm sleeping, Mark." I withdrew my hand. The space between us in our king-sized bed felt like a canyon. That was the first night I felt truly alone while lying next to the woman I loved. This is where it begins, folks. That first, tiny seed of doubt. It's so small you can almost ignore it. Almost. But it has roots. And it grows in the dark. The next clue was her phone. It had become a third person in our marriage. A sleek, black rectangle that commanded more of her attention than I did. She'd always been casual with it, leaving it on the coffee table, the couch. Now it was glued to her. She'd angle the screen away from me when she typed. It never left her purse when she was home. One night, it buzzed on the arm of the sofa, lighting up with a notification. I glanced over. The preview read, "Can't stop thinking about last night." That smile. My blood ran cold. Before I could process it, her hand darted out and snatched the phone. Her face was a mask of calm, but her eyes were wide, panicked. "Who's that?" I asked, my voice tighter than I intended. She forced a laugh, a brittle, unnatural sound. "Oh, just Julie from accounting. She's going through a messy divorce and sending these dramatic texts to everyone. It's pathetic, really. Julie from accounting." Another simple, logical explanation. But Julie had never texted her like that before. The knot in my stomach was now a permanent resident. A cold, hard stone of anxiety. I started watching her more closely, my love slowly curdling into surveillance. I noted the extra time she spent on her makeup in the mornings. The new, more expensive lingerie I found in her drawer. Black lace, not the practical cotton she usually wore. The yoga classes that now ran late 2 nights a week. The pieces were there, scattered on the table, but I couldn't yet see the picture they were forming. Or maybe I didn't want to. The first time I heard his name was at a company barbecue I'd been dragged to. Sarah worked in marketing, and I always felt like a fish out of water with her bright, chatty colleagues. She was in her element, laughing, a glass of white wine in her hand. I was nursing a beer, feeling the outsider. That's when I saw it. The way she looked at him. He was across the patio, a tall man with dark hair and an easy, confident smile. His name was David. I saw him and knew, with a sickening, primal certainty, this was him, the source of the new perfume, the owner of the text message, the occupant of her thoughts. Sarah was talking to a group, but her entire body was angled toward him. Her laughter was a little too bright when he told a joke. She'd tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture I'd always found endearing, but now it felt practiced, performed. For him. He caught her eye and gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod toward the house. A moment later, Sarah excused herself, saying she needed to use the restroom. He waited a beat, then followed. My heart was a hammer in my chest. The noise of the party faded into a dull roar. I set my beer down, my hand trembling, and moved through the crowd, my eyes fixed on the sliding door they disappeared through. I found them not in the house, but just inside, in a dimly lit hallway, partially obscured by a large potted plant. They weren't touching. Not quite. They were standing close, too close for colleagues. Their heads were bent together, speaking in low, intimate tones. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the look on Sarah's face. It was a look of rapt attention, of breathless anticipation. It was a look she hadn't given me in years. David reached out and, with a feather-light touch, brushed a stray eyelash from her cheek. His finger lingered for a fraction of a second on her skin. It was a violation, a claim, and she leaned into it. She didn't pull away. She smiled. A soft, private smile that was a dagger in my heart. I must have made a sound, a choked breath, because her eyes flickered past him and met mine. The smile vanished, replaced by sheer, unadulterated panic. It was all the confirmation I needed. She took a quick step back, her mouth opening to form some excuse, some lie, but I was already turning away. The image of them burned onto the back of my eyelids. The drive home was a frozen silence. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. She stared out the passenger window, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Mark," she finally said, her voice small. "It's not what you think." "What is it, then?" My voice was flat, dead. He was telling me about a client, a sensitive issue. He didn't want anyone else to hear. "He touched your face." The words came out like bullets. She was ready for this. "An eyelash. It was just an eyelash, Mark. You're being paranoid." Paranoid. The word every cheated-on spouse hears. They use it to gaslight you, to make you doubt your own senses, your own sanity. And the worst part? For a moment it works. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was just an eyelash. But that look in her eyes, that wasn't about a client. That was the look of a woman enthralled. If you've been in this position, standing in that cold, lonely space between knowing and not wanting to know, hit that like button. Let me know I'm not alone in this memory. And comment below. What was the first sign for you? That first little crack? The confrontation at the barbecue changed nothing and everything. Nothing, because Sarah denied it all with a practiced calm that chilled me to the bone. Everything, because the fragile trust between us was now shattered glass on the floor. We walked on it every day, careful not to cut ourselves. But the damage was done. The easy companionship of our marriage was replaced by a tense, diplomatic truce. We were roommates sharing a space, a bed, a life that had become a lie. I couldn't live in the uncertainty. The not knowing was a special kind of torture. So I began my descent. I became a detective in my own tragedy. I checked our phone bill online, using a password I'd guessed. Her mother's birthday. There it was. Dozens of texts, hours of calls to a single number. Late at night, early in the morning, while I was in the shower, while I was making her coffee. One night, claiming I had a migraine, I went to bed early. I heard her settle on the couch downstairs, the low murmur of the TV. I crept out of bed and went into my home office, firing up my laptop. I had installed a keylogger a few days prior, an act that made me feel filthy, but desperate times. It recorded every keystroke made on her laptop. My hands were shaking as I opened the log file. Scrolling through mundane searches and work emails, I found it. A login to a private messaging app I'd never heard of. And the password. My heart thundered in my ears as I navigated to the site, typed in her credentials, and hit enter. The world dropped out from under me. There they were. The conversations. Not just flirty, explicit, devastating. David. I can still taste you on my lips. Sarah, don't. I'm lying next to him right now. It's agony. David. Then think of my hands on you. Where they were this afternoon. In that hotel room. Sarah. I am. I'm wet just thinking about it. He has no idea. He's oblivious. David, good. Let him be oblivious. You belong to me now. Every part of you. Sarah, I know. God, what you do to me. I scrolled. My vision blurring with tears of rage and humiliation. They disgust me. They mocked me. Oblivious. The word echoed in my skull. They planned their trysts. The yoga classes. The late work dinners. It was all laid out in brutal, soul-crushing detail. I read about their first time. In the back of his car. A rushed, frantic coupling that she described as the most alive I've felt in years. I read about the third time in a hotel downtown, where she let him do things she'd always refused me. I read her words describing the sound of his voice, the feel of his stubble against her thigh, the way he made her scream. It was a violation deeper than the physical act. It was the theft of our intimacy, the profaning of our shared history. She had given him not just her body, but her secrets, her desires, the parts of herself she had withheld from me for years. I was reading the diary of my own annihilation. I sat there for hours, in the dark, the cold blue light of the screen washing over my face, reading and rereading the evidence of my wife's passionate, thrilling double life. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with, was a stranger, a carefully constructed fiction, and I was the fool who had believed in her. I closed the laptop. The room was spinning. I felt nauseous, unmoored. I needed something, an anchor, a reminder that it had once been real. I stumbled out of the office and down the hall to our bedroom. Sarah was still downstairs, lost in her fantasy world. I went to her side of the bed, to the nightstand where she kept her most precious things. There, in a large leather-bound album, were our wedding photos. I needed to see her face when she looked at me at the altar. I needed to see the truth that had been, to counter the sickening truth of the present. I sat on the edge of the bed, the heavy album on my lap. I opened it. There we were, young, hopeful, ridiculously in love. Me in my tux, looking like a kid playing dress-up. Her in her white gown, a vision. Her smile was radiant, her eyes shining with tears of joy. I traced the outline of her face with my finger, a sob catching in my throat. How did we get from there to here? I turned the pages, each one a fresh wound. The ceremony, the kiss, the first dance, our families, beaming. I was looking for solace, for proof of a love that hadn't been a lie from the start. And then I found it. Not solace, the final, devastating piece of the puzzle. It was a candid shot, taken during the reception. We were on the dance floor, my arms around her, her head resting on my shoulder. We were the picture of marital bliss. But in the background, slightly out of focus, standing near the bar, was a young man. He was looking directly at us. No, not at us. Her. It was David. Younger. His hair a little different, but unmistakably him. The same easy smile. The same intense gaze I'd seen at the barbecue. He was holding a champagne flute, just watching her. A possessive, knowing look on his face. My blood turned to ice. He was at our wedding. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't a recent affair. This wasn't a spark born of marital boredom. This went back years, a decade. He was there, in the background of the most important day of my life, watching my wife. His presence a hidden cancer in the very foundation of our marriage. The title of this story isn't just a line. It's the moment my past was rewritten. It's the moment I realized the entire architecture of my life was built on a lie. I'd looked at this photo 100 times, 1,000, and I'd never seen him. I was too focused on her, on us, on the happiness I thought was ours alone. But he was always there. A shadow in the frame. A ghost at the feast. I tore through the rest of the album, my heart pounding a frantic, panicked rhythm. I found him in 3 more photos. In one, he was in a group shot of her colleagues. He must have worked with her even then. In another, he was talking to her uncle, laughing. And in the final one, a shot of Sarah throwing her bouquet. He was in the crowd of single women, his eyes locked on her, not the flying flowers. That look, it wasn't the look of a casual acquaintance. It was the look of a man in love. A man who believed even then that she belonged to him. The affair hadn't started 6 months ago. It had been simmering for a decade. Their connection, this toxic bond, predated me. Predated our marriage. Every anniversary we'd celebrated. Every child we'd thought about having. Every, "I love you," whispered in the dark. It had all existed in the long, dark shadow of this man. I wasn't just her betrayed husband. I was the placeholder, the convenient stand-in. The entire 13-year narrative of my life with Sarah collapsed in on itself, revealing an uglier, more profound truth. The betrayal wasn't a chapter. It was the whole damn book. Chapter 5, The Confrontation. The evidence was a lead weight in my gut. The messages, the photograph, the timeline that stretched back into a past I thought was sacred. I didn't sleep. I paced the house like a caged animal. The images from the photos and the words from their chats playing on a hellish loop in my mind. I wanted to break something. I wanted to scream. I wanted to put my fist through a wall. But more than anything, I wanted to see her face when I showed her what I knew. I waited until morning. I needed the cold, clear light of day for this. I made coffee. The normalcy of the act felt surreal. The scent of brewing coffee mixed with the acid taste of betrayal in my mouth. She came downstairs, dressed for work, looking tired. She avoided my eyes. "You're up early," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "I couldn't sleep," I said, my own voice eerily calm. I placed her mug of coffee in front of her. Then I placed my laptop on the kitchen table, open to the wedding photo with David clear in the background. I watched her face. She froze. The color drained from her cheeks so completely I thought she might faint. Her hand, reaching for the coffee mug, trembled and withdrew. She looked from the photo to my face, and in her eyes, I saw the collapse of her entire facade. There was no lie left to tell, no eyelash excuse, no paranoid accusation. This was checkmate. "Mark," she whispered, her voice cracking. "How long, Sarah?" My voice was low, dangerously steady. "The truth. All of it." She began to cry, silent tears tracking through her makeup. It's not what you think. Stop saying that." I slammed my hand on the table, the mugs rattling. The calm shattered. "How long?" She flinched, wrapping her arms around herself. We dated. Briefly. Before I met you. It was intense, but it ended badly. He was possessive. I broke it off. "And he was at our wedding?" I hissed, jabbing a finger at the screen. "He still worked there. I couldn't not invite him without it being weird. It was over, Mark. I swear. It was over until... Until when?" I demanded, my heart pounding. "When did it start again?" She looked down at her hands, ashamed. 6 months ago. A work conference. We ran into each other. One drink led to another. Led to another. I finished for her, my voice dripping with venom. Led to hotel rooms. Led to you letting him taste you while you lied in our bed. Led to you telling him I was oblivious. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with fresh horror. She knew I'd seen the messages. "You had no right," she started, a feeble attempt at offense. "I had every right," I roared. "You forfeited your rights to privacy when you started fucking another man behind my back. When you let him into our life, into our bed, into our goddamn wedding photos." The fight went out of her then. She slumped in her chair, a broken doll. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. I'm so sorry, Mark. It was a mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake. A mistake is forgetting to buy milk, Sarah. This is a calculated, sustained campaign of betrayal. You looked me in the eye every day and lied. You made love to me and then you went to him and described it. You hollowed me out. The words hung in the air between us, final and absolute. The kitchen, once the heart of our home, felt like a tomb. The confrontation was over. There was nothing left to say. The truth was out, and it was worse, so much worse, than I had ever imagined. The affair wasn't an escape from our marriage. It was a rival to it, one that had been waiting in the wings from the very beginning. If you've ever had to stand in a room and have your heart torn out by the truth, you know there are no words to describe the pain. It's a silence that screams. If you're still with me, if you're feeling this rage, this heartbreak, then subscribe. Because what comes next? The fallout. It's a lesson in what happens when the foundation crumbles. The days that followed were a blur of logistics and legalities, all conducted in a state of emotional numbness. Sarah moved out. She went to stay with her sister. The house, our home, was now just a building filled with the ghosts of our life together. Every object, every piece of furniture, was a reminder. The couch where she'd texted him, the bed where she'd lied to me, the kitchen table where our marriage had officially ended. I went through the motions. I contacted a lawyer. I listened as he spoke about assets, separation agreements, no-fault divorce. The language was cold, clinical, designed to dissect a living relationship into dead pieces. I didn't care about the money, the house. I cared about the life that was gone. Anger came in waves, white-hot, blinding rage where I would trash the garage, smashing old picture frames and boxes of memories. Then it would recede, leaving behind a vast, empty shore of grief. I'd find one of her hair ties on the bathroom counter and I'd sink to the floor, weeping like a child. I was a pendulum swinging violently between fury and despair. I thought about revenge. Oh God, did I think about it? I had his address from the phone records. I thought about going to his house, confronting him, making him feel a fraction of the pain I was feeling. I thought about exposing them to everyone, their colleagues, their friends, their families. I drafted emails in my head, scorching, detailed indictments of their character. But a strange thing happened. The deeper I delved into my own pain, the clearer something else became. This wasn't just about Sarah and David. This was about me. About the man I had become in our marriage. The oblivious husband. The comfortable, predictable partner she could so easily deceive. Had I stopped seeing her? Had I taken her for granted, assuming our love was a permanent, static thing, not a living entity that needed to be fed and nurtured? I wasn't excusing her betrayal. Nothing could ever excuse that. But I was starting to understand the soil in which it had grown. One night, about a month after she left, I was going through a box in the attic, looking for old tax documents for the lawyer. I found a smaller box, one I'd forgotten about. It was filled with things from our first year together. Movie ticket stubs, a dried corsage from a formal, love letters we'd written to each other. The ink faded, the paper fragile. I sat on the dusty floorboards and read them. My words were full of passion, of wonder. I wrote about her laugh, the way her mind worked, the sheer miracle of her existence. I was her biggest fan, her most ardent admirer. Somewhere along the way, over the years, through the grind of careers and mortgages and daily life, I'd stopped being that man. I'd become the provider, the reliable husband, the fixture. And fixtures are easy to overlook. They become part of the background. It was a devastating, humbling realization. The downfall of our marriage wasn't a single event. It was a slow, quiet erosion. Her affair was the earthquake, but the ground had been made unstable by years of neglect, from both of us. My neglect was one of inattention, of taking her love for granted. Hers was a nuclear option, a cowardly, brutal act of destruction. One did not justify the other, but both were true. The reckoning, I realized, wasn't with her. It was with myself. I had to reckon with the man I'd been, and decide what kind of man I would become after this. Would I be defined by bitterness, by the need for revenge? Or could I find a way to carry this pain without letting it poison me forever? The choice, for the first time in weeks, felt like my own. The divorce proceedings began. It was amicable on the surface. We agreed on the division of assets with a chilling efficiency. We met with our lawyers in sterile conference rooms, speaking through them, two ghosts negotiating the terms of their afterlife. We had one final meeting, just the two of us, to sign the papers at the house. She was coming to collect the last of her things. She looked different, thinner, older. The spark of secret excitement was gone from her eyes, replaced by a flat, weary sadness. We moved through the rooms like strangers, packing her belongings into cardboard boxes. The silence was heavy, oppressive. It was when she was in the living room, taking a few books from the shelf, that she finally spoke about it. Really spoke. "I never meant to hurt you, Mark," she said, her back to me. "I know that's a pathetic thing to say, but it's true." I didn't respond. I just leaned against the doorframe, watching her. She turned around, a book held to her chest like a shield. It was like an addiction. The secrecy, the intensity. It was wrong. I know that. But with him, it was like I was 22 again. I was wanted. I was seen. "I saw you," I said, my voice quiet. "I just saw the you I'd built a life with. I guess I stopped seeing the girl who needed to be chased." She looked down, tears welling in her eyes. "It's no excuse. There is no excuse." She took a deep, shuddering breath. "There's something else, Mark. Something you deserve to know." I stiffened. What now? What other landmine was hidden in the ruins of my life? "David," she said, and the name was like a curse in the quiet room. "It's over. It ended the day you found out." I scoffed. "I find that hard to believe." "It's true," she insisted, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. "When it was a secret, it was a fantasy. When it was out in the open, when it had destroyed a real, actual life, our life, the fantasy died. The guilt, it was suffocating. He couldn't handle it. He wanted the secret lover, not the divorced, heartbroken woman. He ended it." I stared at her, processing this. The great love affair, the passion that was worth destroying a marriage for, had collapsed under the weight of its own consequences. Couldn't survive the light of day. It was a parasite that needed the dark to live. "So you lost us both," I said, not with triumph, but with a profound, aching sadness. She nodded, fresh tears falling. "Yes, I lost everything, and I deserve it." And then she delivered the final twist, the one I never saw coming. "That day," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "the day you looked at the wedding photos. When you saw him, I knew you would." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "I knew you'd go to them," she continued, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "When you were hurting, you'd always look at our wedding photos. It was your touchstone. I'd seen you do it when your father died. When you lost your job. I knew you'd go to that album." A cold dread began to creep up my spine. So, she met my gaze, her eyes filled with a terrible, resigned honesty. "I left it for you to find. Not consciously, maybe, but I put the album right there on my nightstand instead of in the closet where it usually was. Part of me, a sick, twisted part of me, wanted you to know. I was tired of the lying. I was tired of the double life. I was a prisoner of it. And in the most cowardly way possible, I left you the key. I made you my executioner because I didn't have the courage to face what I'd done." The air left my lungs. The room tilted. All this time, I'd thought I was the detective, the active agent uncovering her betrayal. But she had guided me to it. She had set the stage for her own downfall. She had been so trapped in the web of her own deception that her only way out was to be caught. The narrative I had built in my head, of me, the wronged husband, hunting down the truth, crumbled. It was more complex, more tragic, and infinitely more pathetic. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had betrayed herself so completely that she'd orchestrated her own exposure. The hunter and the hunted, the betrayer and the betrayed. Our roles were not as clear-cut as I had believed. She was just as much a victim of the affair as I was, a victim of her own weakness, her own cowardice. The realization didn't lessen my pain. If anything, it deepened it, adding layers of pity and a strange, horrifying sense of shared tragedy. We were both ruins, destroyed by the same fire. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday. It was just a piece of paper, but it felt like the closing of a massive, heavy book. Our story was over. The wife I knew was gone, replaced by this flawed, broken stranger. And the man I was gone too. I didn't get a dramatic revenge. I didn't ruin David's life. In a way, his life was already ruined. He was a man who could only find passion in the shadows, who fled from real-world consequences. He was a hollow man, and he and Sarah had been perfect for each other in their shared emptiness. My revenge, in the end, was to live well. It was a cliché, but clichés exist for a reason. I sold the house. The memories it held were too heavy. I moved to a new neighborhood, a modern apartment with no history, no ghosts. I started therapy. I started running, pounding the pavement until my lungs burned and my muscles ached, trying to run away from the pain, and eventually running through it. I learned to be alone, not lonely, but alone, to enjoy my own company, to cook a meal for one and savor it, to sit in silence and not be afraid of the thoughts in my head. I reconnected with old friends. I started painting again, a hobby I'd abandoned years ago. The pain didn't disappear. It became a part of me, a scar tissue over my soul. Some days it ached with a dull, persistent throb. Other days I forgot it was there. But I was no longer defined by it. I was no longer the betrayed husband. I was just Mark, a man who had survived. I saw Sarah once, about a year later, in a grocery store. She was in the produce section looking at avocados. She looked older, calmer. She saw me, and for a moment we just looked at each other across the bin of vegetables. Two veterans from a forgotten war. There was no anger left, no love, just a vast, quiet recognition of the history we shared. A history that was now as distant and unchangeable as the pyramids. She gave me a small, sad smile. I nodded back. Then we both turned and walked our separate ways into our separate lives. The moral of the story isn't that love is a lie. It's that love is a living thing. It needs light and air and constant, vigilant care. It can be poisoned by neglect, and it can be murdered by betrayal. But you can survive. You can walk through the fire and emerge on the other side scarred, yes, but stronger, wiser. My story is a cautionary tale, but it's also a story of resilience. It's about finding the cracks before the whole structure falls. It's about paying attention to the silences. It's about never, ever taking the person you love for granted. Because you never know what shadows might be lurking in the background of your own wedding photos. If the story resonated with you, if it brought up your own feelings of doubt or betrayal, then do me a favor. Hit that like button. Let me know this journey meant something to you. Share your own story in the comments below. What was the twist in your tale? Did you see the signs, or were you, like me, oblivious until the very end? And if you want to hear more stories about the messy, complicated, heartbreaking, and sometimes redemptive world of relationships, then subscribe. Hit that notification bell. I have so many more stories to tell. This is just the beginning. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for staying until the end. Now go and love more carefully than I did.